Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Grant Turner is making the world better one swoosh at a time in Canada. Mark Ostrander is on the train. So I am pleased and happy to be joined by my good buddy from the streets of Kansas City, now the pride of Des Moines, Iowa, former podcast picker Cody Goodwin, who I bugged a lot this weekend on Press Row, which I'm rarely at. It was a lot of fun, Cody. Thanks for jumping on with me, man. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you inviting me. Interesting conversations being had over the weekend, I feel like, by a lot of the wrestling community, and especially those of us on Press Row. So maybe we continue that today. I'm not sure. I'm following your lead here.
Yeah, it was normally when I'm there, I'm running around, like either talking to coaches for USA Wrestling, podcast, events, stuff like that. And it was a different thing. I did the interviews on Sunday morning, but for the most part, I was with you and Earl and Gary Abbott. And one of my friends, Zerwa Tenney, was nice enough to take a picture of us, which was a lot of fun. But I mean, there was a lot of interesting conversations. I like those talks because you don't have to agree with smart people. It's just nice to hear the other side of it and the why. And most of those conversations are fun, Cody, because no one's really right or wrong. We just have to wait and see how it plays out, right?
Yeah, right. Kind of a meshing of, wrestling minds and ideas and, because let's just jump into it, right? The attendance part was a kind of an interesting conversation point when it came to the World Team Trials, right? And so there were a lot of good conversations going on online. We were all sitting there on Press Row like, well, what do you do? Should we tweak it? How do we tweak it? Why do we tweak it? Like, what's the right answer? We don't know. And so that's why those conversations were interesting, right? Because we're all trying to push the sport forward, but it's like, okay, like what do we think is the best way to do that? Why? Like, that's what made those conversations so interesting.
Yeah. And my mom's a communications teacher, and she teaches a lot of that out of that book, The 7 Habits of Effective People. And one of those habits is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And if you follow that premise, it's important to understand where that person comes from. Like you have a different background than I do. You're a younger guy than I am. We grew up in the Midwest, but not in the same place. You live in a state now that's wrestling crazy, and I live in a city that's baseball and hockey crazy. Your day-to-day stuff involved in wrestling is different than mine, but we both love wrestling. We both love how it impacted our lives. We both want to take whatever skills or gifts God gave us and try to make the sport better. And so it's interesting. We can talk about the attendance. We can start with that. I talked to somebody about that on the phone yesterday. And, obviously we're on USA Wrestling's airwaves. But, my feeling is this. I think USA Wrestling is trying to do the very best at the end, which is world and Olympic gold medals and medals, just period medals. It'd be hard to argue they're not doing a really, really good job. That when you look at the 2020 Olympics, which were in 21, it was, I think, the most successful Olympics ever, with the possible exception of the boycott year, which, those guys all deserve what they won, but it's a huge asterisk when you take those specific countries out. If the argument is we want to make the other events that lead up to that bigger, only room for improvement, but the idea that we let the best person sit, they don't have to peak as many times, they have a better chance of being healthy when it really, really counts. And these coaches are doing, you only have to break tape down of me and then of 4 foreign wrestlers, maybe 5 foreign wrestlers. It's hard to argue that these RTCs around the country are not figuring it out and getting it done in a really good way.
No, the results have been fantastic on the world and Olympic level, at the senior level. We see the women especially have really kind of caught up to what the men have been able to do. I mean, you mentioned the Olympics, they took all 6, 5 wrestled for medals. 4 came away with medals, which, before Tokyo, there had only ever been like 5 Olympic women's wrestling medalists at the Olympics all time for Team USA. Like, yeah, you nailed it. Really hard to argue. I guess my counter to that would be, because I'm in favor of changing up the format. I'm not sure that I'm the biggest fan of Final X if we're thinking of the sport at large. Like, I think you nailed it, that there's been a lot of good that's come out of it. But I guess my question would be, what harm would it do to the incumbents, those who previously made world teams, those who previously won world medals, to have to stay sharp one more time and win another tournament in order to defend their spot? Because I think I'm in favor of bringing the world team members back into the World Team Trials Challenge tournament and just making it a one weekend, one tournament deal where we decide our team at the end of the tournament, because then that could allow for more training time. That's something that's, the world team could be together. You're not stretching the process over the course of, a month and a half, 2 months, where, people who do get all the way to Final X that aren't the incumbent, they have to peak, 2, sometimes 3 times in order to get to that point. Right. That's, that makes it really hard to unseat the guy or gal who held the spot before, right?
If they medal. So again, if you don't medal, you just go into the bracket. So let's take a 50,000-foot view for people that aren't as big of dorks about wrestling as you and I are. It's a gigantic funnel, okay? And there's multiple ways to sort of start at the top of the funnel. You can place at the U.S. Open. You can be an NCAA All-American in the women's. You can be an NAIA or
there's a lot of ways to qualify for the World Team Trials. Yeah.
To originally get into basically the U.S. Open or the World Team Trials. There's a bunch of people that get into the World Team Trials. If you didn't hit any of those criteria, you can go to the U.S. Open. And if you place high enough, you now go into the World Team Trials. So that's sort of levels 1 and 2. Then the World Team Trials are held, and they end up with 2 wrestlers out of that. Either 2 wrestlers from World Team Trials if no one medaled at the weight, or the winner of the World Team Trials versus the returning medalist. In this case, this year was a unique year where 2 medalists did not accept their bids, one because of the WWE and one because of pregnancy. And so 2 pretty good reasons. But normally everyone accepts. And the other thing that they've done really well, the USA Wrestling has done is, the non-Olympic weights get preferential treatment into the Olympic weights if they choose to move up or down. But so now, let's say Cody's a returning gold medalist, silver medalist, bronze medalist, doesn't matter, at 57 kgs, and I cut off a limb and a leg, and now I'm down to 57 kgs, and I win the World Team Trials, then I go into the match with Cody, which will be held at either Stillwater or New York City. So that's the big view. If what you're essentially saying is, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is combine Vegas, Coralville, Stillwater, and New York City into one gigantic tournament.
Sort of. So like if we're going to call something the World Team Trials, like, the world team should be decided at the end of that tournament, right? In theory.
No, the name makes sense. So you'd like to call it the Final X qualifier.
It's basically what it is, right? Like, that's
right. No, I mean, it's just truth in labeling is what you'd like to have it.
Perhaps. I would also like to just consolidate the process. I think it should be a 2-step process. You qualify for the World Team Trials, and then you have to win the World Team Trials. Now, we can keep all the criteria that it requires to qualify for the World Team Trials. You medal top 7 at the US Open, NCAA All-Americans top 3, you win certain tournaments, Last Chance, Bill Farrell, whatever the case may be. And I'm of the belief that, if I were in charge, and I'm not for various reasons, but if I was in charge, returning world team members, whether or not they win a medal, automatically the 1 seed at the World Team Trials. And then if you want to continue to place importance on the US Open champ can be the 2 seed at that weight. And then you seed the rest of the qualifiers in, you wrestle till you get your finalists on day 1. And then day 2, you do your best of 3 series. Because there's a lot of reasons why Final X came about, right? It was kind of a cool marketing promotional type thing. But then also, like, the returning medalists, world medalists that got to sit out, those that had to navigate the challenge tournament, they would do that on like a Saturday, and then they would wrestle their best of 3 series on Sunday. So the returning medalist was fresh, right? So they did that to maybe space out time a little bit for the challenge trial, like the trials challenge champ.
So you're better at the dates. The year that it was in Lincoln, where David Taylor and Jaden had that epic 2 out of 3 that was like on the mat that ended up being super wet. That was 2017, correct?
Yeah.
2017 or 18. I think it was 17. So anyway, I was lucky enough to coach in that tournament. I coached Savion Severato, who made the finals of the juniors team. And was not as involved with US. I was actually with track, so I wasn't involved with USA Wrestling at all. But because I was coaching, I had a pretty good seat for the finals. And that was where JB and Dake had that epic 2 out of 3 match where Dake won a match and then it went and almost won the other match. And there's a brick challenge. And then the third one where Dake's almost got him in the crowd throw and Jordan wins. I think the most interesting person to talk about all of this would be Kyle Dake, because I think he's been on both sides of it, right? Like for years, he was the voice of him and Rob Cole were the voice of, hey man, this isn't fair.
I mean, look, historically, he had a point. It's really hard to unseat the incumbent. And now, now that he's in the position, first at 79, now at 74, like that's an interesting point. I'd be curious to see if his tune changed a little bit, but like the point still stands. What they were harping on back then, like it's hard to unseat the incumbent. I mean, that's part of the conversation we were having on Press Row this past weekend.
Yeah. I think that was a big driver of it. Right. But again, like Mensa stock, here's where I think I disagree with you. I don't think Mensa stock should have the same situations Kayla Miracle. Somebody won the Olympics. And I'm just using the Olympics, and let's say this was now 21, okay? But she won, and Kayla didn't medal. It feels like them both being the 1 seed somehow doesn't seem fair. So
well, they're the world team member. That's the thought process. Like they won the spot.
To me, there's it's like saying there's supermodels and then there's supermodels, right? Like there's world team member and then there's world team members, right? There's people that made it, which is, they're both a hell of a lot better than you and I ever were. Okay. But then there's people that medal and then there's people that win. And those are all different. I mean, you're a historian of the sport. I'd like to say I'm an historian of the sport, but I don't remember every world team member from the last 20 years, but I think I got a pretty good idea of who medaled and especially the winners.
Right. Well, I guess the angle I'm coming from in terms of just consolidation and simplifying is, I mean, it's just that it's consolidating and it's simplifying because
right.
It's like try to explain the world team trials process to a non-wrestling person. It's hard. Like it's really like you kind of have to go into, you qualify for this tournament and then you have to win this tournament. And then if there's somebody who is also really good at that weight, they have to win another event. And it's like, it's a 3-step process. Like it's a confusing thing. So how do we simplify it? That's what I'm coming from.
So I love that point. And I say this to Mark and Grant. Like I'll take that same concept of how complicated it is to college. Okay. Most of the competitions are you're Cody. I don't know anything about wrestling Goodwin. So Cody, most of the time it's just one team against another. And the guy gets 3, 4, 5, or 6 for winning, depending on how much he wins. Then they go to during the season, they go to a lot of 1-day and 2-day tournaments. The team scoring is completely different. You get points for taking 6th as soon as you make the final 4. You get points. Then they go to the big tournament and it's 3 days. And you get different points for pinning a person in a tournament than you do in a dual meet. Like it's so complicated. Like I call it the girlfriend test, right? Like if you're watching with your girlfriend and you're an Iowa fan, is that a fair statement?
No, I'm a Mizzou fan. You knew this.
You're a Mizzou fan. Okay, you're a Mizzou fan. That's right. You still owe me wings on that bet. So Keegan O'Toole pins in the quarterfinals of nationals. It is difficult to explain to the girlfriend. He just got 9 points.
Well, see, then I would I don't cross that bridge unless they meet me halfway. Like if I'm explaining the NCAA wrestling postseason, I explain it how you do the regular season with one team versus another team, but then the postseason is a lot more like track and field where you have a bunch of different weights, or in the case of track and field, a bunch of different events and everybody scores points. And the team that accrues the most points through all 10 weights wins at the end of it. And that tends to help, at least in my experience, when it comes to
that's a great analogy.
Simplifying, right? Simplifying. That's what we're trying to do here.
I also think that there's a reason why track and field and wrestling aren't as popular as say football. Because football, to me, it almost feels like this, that how you score points, and maybe your track and field analogy is a better one, but it almost feels like in football, okay, now it's 4 downs and 12 yards for a first down. It doesn't feel like you're scoring exactly the same way. The bigger picture, I think, is hey, in tournaments, your best guys or girls win the tournament, women. And in duels, your worst ones do. Like if you're way better than me, I can just only lose by 14 points. That's super helpful. I only gave up 4, not 5 or 6. But in a tournament, I'm gonna go 0-2 either way. If I'm not very good, I might not even get in the tournament if I'm not that good. Like the nationals at the end of the year. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the results of World Team Trials. We're not going to fly.
You mean the Final X qualifier?
Final X qualifier, the FXQ. Okay, since we're on USA Wrestling, I'm going to call it the World Team Trials. What were, just broad strokes, what were your takeaways, and then maybe we'll dive a little deeper.
There were some encouraging performances, but I think by and large, I don't know that there were too many big surprises, if that makes sense. I think the weights to watch, 70 kilo, like that one probably went how a lot of us probably thought it would, right? You got Jo and you got Zane coming out, and they're going to wrestle at Final X for the world team spot. 79 maybe went a little bit differently than some of us thought. Chance Marsteller beats Vincenzo in, a winner take all in the best of 3 final series to advance to Final X. I think a lot of us maybe thought, Alex Daringer would probably be the guy to come out and maybe make a run there, but even after Vincenzo beat him at the US Open. But, give credit to, Vincenzo won for basically training for a month before the US Open and then just continuing to train through and get to the World Team Trials. Give a lot of credit to Chance Marsteller. What a cool story that is, right? That's at 79 kilos. And look at who he beat. Starachi.
So I have his path pulled up here. So he was the 5.
Yeah, Starachi, McFadden, and then Chenzo twice in 3 matches. Like that's not easy, man. Like that was really cool to see unfold. That was a fun story to follow through the weekend.
Yeah. So we can start at 79 on the men's side. So it's what's weird about all these weights is that I talked to Gary Abbott about this. In men and women's freestyle, the U.S. Open champ was automatically the number 1 seed, not the same in Greco, which is another caveat. Clearly, McFadden deserved to be, just if you go off the U.S. Open, which you should, McFadden beat Chenzo beat Daringer. I think Daringer must have placed ahead of Marsteller. Not sure exactly the criteria for how you sort of thread the needle with Starachi, but you get to where you get. If you like, Starachi was a very popular pick, including Jordan Burroughs, and he did a really good job that match.
And he did come back and take third. So he's in one of those true third matches. I think he's got to wrestle Chenzo for a true third. In any case, yeah.
Who does?
Starachi. He ended up beating Ringer on the backside.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. That was actually, to me, that was one of the bigger takeaways, that Ringer wasn't in the top 4.
A little surprising, but that kind of speaks to the depth of the weight, right?
It does. And what's really sort of terrifying is that the King still lives at this weight, and all of them are going up or down in 2 years.
Dude, we were cracking jokes about that. Like, Chance Marsteller had one heck of a weekend, and it's like, congratulations. Now you get to wrestle Jordan Burroughs at least twice, potentially 3 times. Like,
well, and I think he'd be here for all that smoke if he got to match 3. That means he won a match, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Like this weight's really crazy. Imar, doesn't medal. And then, you got the young guns like a Braden Thompson a high school kid out of Illinois.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this was a fun weight. This was, when you've got 2 guys that combined for 5 NCAA titles in the quarterfinals with Ringer and Imar,
right.
And then that's just, Taylor Lujan, I know didn't have maybe his best tournament, but like that guy was the 1 seed during the COVID season, or the season, the NCAA championships that COVID canceled. Like just a stacked weight, right? Which I think is what made it so intriguing going in. And Marsteller ran the gauntlet to advance. That was a heck of a performance from him. 70,
I think, surprised me just because I thought Pantaleo would make the finals.
Yeah, hey, he got to the semis. Like, that's a big win over Tyler Berger in the quarters. And then Berger, I think, wrestled all the way back to third. So, that's a good win for Pantaleo there. But that's, this is another pretty deep weight, right? Look at the semis. Pantaleo, Rutherford, Oliver, Deacon.
Right. Yes, exactly. It's not like a shot. Like Sammy Sasso, who, is still really good in college, loses 10-0 in the quarters. And the conversation you and I had a lot, the comment came up a lot. There's levels to this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and so again, it's like these guys should all be proud of the level they are, and they're all trying to level up. I watched Pantaleo wrestle a bunch last year. I watched him at the Rudis event, and just he seemed like he was on a really good roll, and he seemed like he really knew how to wrestle Jordan Oliver. It feels like the Rutherford draw was not great for him. To me, the story of men's freestyle, besides the two weights that you talked about, was Evan Henderson.
Dude,
So,
he yeah, I mean that was an incredible what he beat Lugo, Maple, Nick Lee. Now he's got Yanni in Final X, best 2 or 3 for the spot at 65. Yeah, man, like and look at the scores, right? 7-4 over Lugo. Like Lugo he hasn't given up 7 points in Lord knows when. Like even when he lost to Maple at the Open, it was like 3-2.
yeah.
Then he beats Maple, the Open champ, 5-2, and then 12-11 over Nick Lee. That one kind of stamped it, because Henderson's always been this dude, him, like he's a little bit of a high flyer. He's got offense. He's going to put points on the board. Sometimes he'll give up points to score points. But to be able to just kind of always stay a point or two ahead of Nick Lee, like that's a hard thing to do. That's when I was like, all right, like maybe he's got something. Yanni's going to be a beast, but like I think a lot of people would have said the same thing about Nick Lee, right? Who tore through Josh Saunders, your boy, Matt Kolodzik in the quarters. Like that's, we know how good Nick Lee is, and Henderson he found a way. Like he gritted it out. It was really impressive to watch him keep going.
And Nick Lee beat Yanni at the Olympic trials,
Yeah.
so like, if you just go off freestyle results, I mean, if you set gambling odds, I'm not sure what the odds would be, but the Nick Lee versus Yanni would be much closer to even money than probably Yanni and Henderson will be. So I just had Henderson on Matt Chat. It just came out late last night. Super interesting guy. Actually took his seat at the Iowa Athletic Club by accident and ended up buying him lunch for doing that. He's bounced around at a lot of different clubs. So I think I told you I was doing those interviews on Sunday morning, and I walked in the back to interview somebody. It was right after Nick Lee had hit a fireman's on Henderson, and it was 6-0 Nick Lee. And then it eventually became 8-0 Nick Lee. And then Henderson comes all the way back. I don't want to ruin the pod. I think it's worth watching or listening to just hear how he thought when he's down 8-0. Because I think how he thinks at 0-8 is different than 99% of us think.
Well, he had a really funny joke coming off, because that semifinal was a Sunday morning match, right? So he
Right.
comes off behind, and you were probably there. I'm a zombie. You can't kill me. Like that's, that was right off the mat. So, he's still probably locked in and in his own at that point. But that's, easy dude to root for. People should go listen to your show.
He's very, very likable.
Yeah.
He's just a very likable guy. He had this saying that says, "He dies, I rise." And, I feel like that's going to, should end up on a lot of people's walls and, wrestling rooms across America. He just has a very good mindset. The women's freestyle I guess I'll go first here. The one that really sort of stuck out to me was Dom Parrish. I saw her wrestle at the Pan Ams and, got a chance. She was one of those interviews we got, and her mindset is really good out there in Sunkist. Like she's really in a good place mentally. And there's a ton of those Sunkist ladies that are in a really good position right now. So
they got a good thing going when it comes to women's freestyle. Not just the, Kayla Miracle Forrest, Dom Parrish, but they've also, that the Blade sisters are coming there. Katie Gomez recently committed to the Sunkist RTC, because Arizona State doesn't have a women's program yet. So they're just kind of, loading up the Sunkist RTC with a bunch of high level women's freestylers, which is really, really cool. Yeah, I mean, this is, a tangential conversation to how we kind of started the podcast. Like there were a few weights, and Parrish's being one of them, 53 kilos, right? Where it was 2 semifinal matches. They both happened on Sunday morning, and it's like, cool. They both won, and now they both advanced to Final X, right? Dom Parrish has Felicity Taylor, who's an Iowa native, became a superstar or furthered her stardom at McKendree, right? She was a junior national champ. Yeah. She's been to the collegiate national finals 4 times. That's an intriguing weight because, both of these women have made age level world teams. I think they were on the same U23 team. And now one of them will rep US in Bulgaria later this summer. So that's an intriguing little weight there. And I'm excited to see that Final X matchup.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to share another tab because I never win these bets. And I won this week. So these are our picks. So Cody, Mark, GT, and I made picks. The black ink is if we picked the person that was right. The red ink is if what we picked is wrong. Just to go quick, we did it in men's freestyle, women's freestyle, and Greco. Mark went 6-7, 6-8, and 15-4.
Not bad.
GT was 7-6, 6-8, 13-6. But your boy 7-6, 8-6, 17-2, baby.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
So to me, this kind of tells you where the surprises are too. Like I think men's freestyle was interesting too with Seth Gross pinning Megaludis. I thought that was pretty surprising. And DeShazer making the finals was pretty surprising.
That one was intriguing just because we know who Seth Gross is, but and then you and me might know who Daniel DeShazer is or have known of him maybe longer than others just because he's from Kansas. But he finally put together an almost complete tournament. I say almost because Gross got him in the finals on Sunday, but that was, he's looked as good as and even then in the second match, maybe a little bit better mat awareness, and there's a match 3 in that series. But hey, give credit to Seth Gross, who is another person that just does not seem to go away when it comes to senior men's freestyle.
No, for sure. So to touch on the Greco, to me, the biggest story, and I know him because he wrestled in my event, and he's a super likable, I guess I'll call him a young man, not a kid, is Kamal Bey being back. And
that was exciting to hear his name over the loudspeaker. I'm sure if there were more fans in the stands, there would have been a little bit juice to hear him because he's that high flyer, big Greco thrower, who's very good domestically and is still, he's kind of scratching that, international stuff the way Tracy for years was just trying to figure out international Greco, right? Because there's a difference between domestic and international. And, maybe this is the year he finally breaks through, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's got to wrestle Britain, and make the team. But I just, I'm very good friends with Mike Powell from Oak River Forest. And Mike Powell's one of those guys, if you don't like Mike Powell, there's something wrong with you. That kind of thing. Another guy that's growing wrestling and has grown wrestling in multiple ways. Let me give a shout out to them. The Beat the Street Chicago organization is running their gala next weekend.
They do great work out there.
Taking donations. This next weekend's kind of a great/terrible weekend because I wanted to go to Final X. I wanted to go to Spire, and I'm going to go to Chicago because I'm honored to be a advisory board member there and really proud of what they do and to be 1/100th of 1% of that. So plus it gives me a chance to get out of sweatsuits.
Ain't nothing wrong with being comfy, man.
I'm gonna have a good hair day. It's gonna be good. But yeah, so obviously I know Kamal. He actually wrestled on our event a couple years ago. He wrestled Aaron Brooks in a 3-style match. So we can do this a couple ways, Cody. Do you want to make Final X picks? We'll put them on wax. You can get in on the contest with us.
Sure. You know what? Let's do it.
All right.
Way too early guesses here.
Yeah, way too. Well, some of them are not that far, right? Like, I mean.
Yeah, I guess what, June 3rd? So that's a week from now.
Yeah. So, all right. So here we go. Who you got here, Sammy or Thielke?
Oh, I like Jesse Thielke. I'll roll with him at 63 Greco.
Okay, 2 matches or 3?
I think 2 matches, but 2 very close matches.
Diamond or Yolana?
I like Diamond. She looked really, really good this weekend.
2 or 3?
We'll go 3.
Schultz or Tanner?
Schultz in 2. Big Colton Schultz, Coltrane.
Kane or Jo?
I'm taking Jo in 3. That's probably the marquee. It's hilarious that that's the 4th bout at Final X Stillwater because that's maybe one of the marquee matchups of the entire thing.
I think that's the most, that one and the Jenna Jakara match, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I think Gilman Vito's sort of low key, sneaky good because Vito made some nice adjustments to the Olympic Trust. But we'll get there. Okay, Pat Smith, the most easily pronounced name in Greco versus the most exciting man in Greco, Benji P.
I'll take Pat Smith in 2. I think Benji's almost there, but maybe not quite there just yet.
All right, Basham Nettie.
Nettie in 3. I like the way Lexi Basham wrestles, though. She's tough.
Provisor Woods.
Provisor in 2. Shout out Grandview.
Shout out Grandview. Shout out GT. Might have had a little bit to do with that recruiting process. Gilman Vito.
I'll take Gilman in 2.
Nowry Kuntz.
I like Max Dowry in 2.
Dayton Gross.
Dayton in 2.
Jenna Jakara.
I'm going Jenna in 3. But
I was
you're
like,
right.
I don't care who you pick, but if you don't pick 3, I'd be shocked.
I'm going with Jenna there, but you're right. That along with probably Zane Jo and maybe kind of quietly Gilman Vito, probably the marquee matchups, at least on this first card in Stillwater.
Yeah. Jaden Nate.
I'll take Jaden in 2. Although shout out Nate Jackson, 4-0 in Coralville and outscored his opponents 40-0. Just kind of came in, swept up, and went home. Just
and
real
did the same thing
stuff.
the week before at the Last Chance.
Yeah, just real impressive.
Yeah. Snowflake Belty.
Ooh, Forrest in 3.
Okay. Snyder, Colin Moore. I feel very comfortable what you're going here, but go ahead.
Snyder in 2.
Tamira and Sienna.
I'll take Tamara in 2.
Okay. All right. Second. So here
Final
we
X New York.
Start out with a banger, Holmes and Bay.
I know, right? The great Greco stuff to start off both these cards. I think I'll take Holmes in 3.
Oh, okay. All right. Grody Allure.
I'll go Allure in 2.
And this is the weight. This is the weight that's normally.
No, this is a non-Olympic weight. 70. You're thinking 76 with Adeline?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah. I looked at it. I'm like, that's the wrong number.
Yeah.
Okay. Evan Yanni. And these guys trained together for over a year, Evan told me.
I'm still gonna go Yanni in 2. He's
Yanni
just
too.
a little bit. Okay, so a matchup like this is what would make a World Team Trials in 1 weekend in 2 days all the more interesting because Evan Henderson would blow through the top half of that bracket on Saturday, and he would make so many big fans because everybody would be in the seats watching this thing. And
I got you. Yeah.
And then they would come back the next day, and it's like, oh my gosh, can he do it? Can he unseat Yanni? And it would be all sorts of hype.
Don't disagree. Vera Young.
I'll take Vera in 2.
Zilmer Gwiz. This one is interesting to me.
It's very interesting because I got to go Gwiz in 2. Like just a little bit more confident in what he brings to 125. But I'll tell you what, like Zilmer could. I don't know. Zilmer's got his style is just intriguing to me the way it matches up with Gwiz. So I think there'll be 2 very entertaining matches.
I think Zilmer's got the style like Gwiz does really well against slower, heavy-footed, maybe stronger, certainly heavier guys. But the guys that are more athletic than him are usually present him troubles. And I'm not saying Zilmer's more athletic, but I feel like he's equally athletic. And obviously, we know that whole story about him and Don Bradley being in the same Fargo tournament, 200 pounds apart, basically. So I mean, Zilmer's got little guy skills.
Also, shout out to Don Bradley for making another national team because that guy is the ageless wonder.
Shout out Missouri. Shout out Kansas City. Shout out
Blue Springs.
Yeah, there you go. Sancho Nutter.
I'll go Sancho in 2.
Okay. Felicity and Dom.
I'm going Felicity in 3. I think she could do this.
Okay.
Shout out South Winneshiek.
Talton Roberts, Ildar, Havisov.
I'll go Ildar in 3. I think Roberts gets a match.
Kayla, Jennifer Rogers.
Kayla in 2.
Yeah, that's a rematch of the U.S. Open final, which lasted like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Hancock, Amos.
Hancock in 2.
Okay.
A classic battle of international Greco versus domestic Greco.
There you go. Sarah Hildebrand, Alyssa Lampy.
Sarah Hildebrandt in 2.
Dakin 2.
I'll take Dakin 2, but I think that'll be 2 interesting matches against Jason Null. For some reason, I talked myself into thinking that could be an interesting series, even though I think Dake is, again, levels to this game.
Well, Dake sunned him at the Olympic trials. So.
Right. Yeah. That's, a little
He did
crazy.
do that. Helen and Hedrick.
I'll take Helen in 2.
Okay. JB Marsteller.
JB in 2 very interesting matches. Dude, Chance looks so good and just stylistically, like, I don't know, like he's just a tank. So like I'm very curious to kind of see how JB handles that.
I think what's really interesting is I kind of wanted to see Burroughs against Vincenzo, just the wall of hips there. Like I wanted to see JB hit him with that double and see what happened. Like would he run through him or would he get brought up?
Like throwing a Mento in a Diet Coke bottle. Like let's just kind of maybe something cool happens. Maybe it's just a mess. I don't know. Like I hear you though.
I'm so old. I thought Pop Rocks, but
that works too. That works too.
So
and also Chenzo just like goes into situations like that fearless. So it's like he gets a random underhook and like when's the last time JB had to defend an underhook and like, hips come to the party and things get weird.
Or, Chenzo gets that overhook and you get too comfortable, right? Like, I mean.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
But also like that matchup specifically, like I feel like Chance has the ability to slow matches down sometimes. Whereas like Chenzo is just probably like, he does too, but it's just like high flying all the time. And like, I guess JB's speed, I think that would have been an X factor against Chenzo. Whereas like against Chance, I think it's still an X factor, but I just don't know how much.
I talked to Kendall Cross about Marsteller, and I'm not going to talk about who he was wrestling or would be wrestling, but I said, "What's the plan?" He goes, "The less wrestling, the better." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "The more we hand fight," he's like, "we can't be taking super long across the body, high crotches," and that's the blessing of building relationships with these kind of guys and these coaches. Like, it's just. Sometimes they tell you something you never thought of. Sometimes he tell you something that you actually thought of, and it makes you feel even smarter, but it's really fun. You and I were on the Burroughs presser yesterday, correct? Yesterday morning?
Yeah, I sat there and listened to it.
Yeah. First of all, let us all ask one question and instead of people asking 3 and 4-part questions in the future. Second of all, Burroughs said the match he's most intrigued by is the last match here, which is DT Zahid. So who you got?
I'm going DT in 2, but I think it'll be 2. I think Zahid will give him a fight. I really do. Zahid has looked really good since his kind of return to freestyle. He was very, very impressive last weekend in Coralville. I think we were sitting there during the first Zahid Mark Hall match in their best of 3 final. And this blew me away. The last 4 times that Zahid and Mark Hall have wrestled freestyle matches, Mark Hall has scored exactly 0 points on him. Like
Dave Matthews told us that.
Shout out Dave Matthews. That was an incredibly hard stat to believe. But you could tell probably midway through the second period of the second match that Zahid he was just a bear. And there was just, I've never seen Mark Hall stunned like that, but Zahid's that good, right? It's almost like it was a reminder like, oh yeah, this guy was a 2-time NCAA champ for a reason. And a junior world silver medalist, like he's good.
Yeah. And that COVID year when he had that problem, but he would have been the number 1 seed, if he hadn't gotten any trouble. So, I mean, yeah. All right. 2 last things to talk about. One, I texted you about Taylor Lamont from Utah Valley to Wisconsin. So we think he goes 33 and Barnett stays at 25 is because of Greco.
That's my thought, right? Because Lamont wrestles 60 kilo, which is roughly 132, 133. So it makes sense for him to kind of build into that weight a little bit more. But that's another All-American in the Big Ten and more specifically in Wisconsin lineup. which makes them a little bit more intriguing in terms of, Big Ten duels, and then obviously, tournament firepower potential. So that's an intriguing little pickup there for Chris Bono.
Wisconsin's been very good in the portal.
Quite quietly, yes, they've been quite good, because you look at, and not just that, but I guess what Gomez was the other one, but they've also got Hamidi coming back. They've got, Hamidi was just a freshman this year. Hilger, I think, is coming back for one more year, so that's another guy who's been an All-American twice.
Braxton Amos is a guy.
Yeah,
that,
yeah, he got there. He got to the big dance. Had some moments.
Right,
but yeah,
just a guy with a lot of
good
upside.
lineup.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sneaky.
And
good
they
lineup.
also got Seth Gross in the portal. I mean, it's not shocking. Obviously, he followed,
Yeah,
Bono and Reader,
yeah.
but I mean, they've been very good in the portal in terms of points that have come over. A lot of people get guys and they don't make a difference. Like, if you look at their portal moves and a percentage of their overall team score, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, they have found a way to capitalize quite a bit on the portal, which is, fun things are building in Madison.
Yeah. This last one really surprised me for two reasons. Michael Kemmer to the Spartan Combat RTC Wrestling Club. One, Kemmer looked like he was held together with gum, Band-Aids, and paper clips, which, to his credit, there's no insult there at all. Like, most people would have called it a day. The shoulder harness, the knee brace, walking around, his walking gait makes him look older than me. So I thought maybe he's just done. And then two, I'm surprised he's leaving Iowa. So you are up there. Were you surprised by either one of these? Do you have any sort of background information you could help us with?
I mean, I wasn't super surprised, because Ithaca, he's originally from Pennsylvania. Ithaca takes him a little bit closer to home, takes him back to the Northeast at the very least. The other thing he mentioned in the Spartan release, and I haven't talked to him, was just he's excited to be affiliated with Cornell and kind of tap into that alumni base. Cornell, a lot of their degrees in economics and finance and accounting, like held in very high regard, which is what he did at Iowa. Got a master's in finance. He's really good with numbers. They say, guy. Yeah, right. They say he's going to be a resident athlete in Russell 79. Again, I haven't talked to him. I'm not sure how much wrestling he'll actually do. I'd like to see him wrestle freestyle just because it's always fun to see Michael Kemmer wrestle. But also they're going to have him there in a coaching capacity, which is going to be good for the guys at the Spartan RTC. It's going to be good for the guys in the Cornell room, because you look at who's already on staff, right? It's Mike Gray, Donnie Vincent, Kellen Russell, and Gwiz. So they have, kind of the lightweights up to about 57. They got guys there. They got Gwiz for heavyweight 97. So then you bring in Michael Kemmer to kind of help with that 65 to 84 range. Makes perfect sense to me, right? Like, that's a slam dunk home run hire for
it's a great perspective. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
Yeah. No, I mean, it made a lot of sense. And honestly, like, for those of us that know Michael Kemmer, I think he's going to be a great coach. Again, I hope he wrestles a little bit, but I think this is really more to probably help him, in terms of just the coaching transition, which I think will be really cool. And also to tap into the Cornell Alumni Network, it'll help him out for life after wrestling whenever he decides to open up that chapter as well.
Yeah, for sure. I went to Washington University here in St. Louis, and it's, business school's top 20 in the country. And if like you said, the networking is substantial there, and, just telling people you graduated from certain schools matter. So you're really good at the 50,000 foot view thing. You're also really good at, the up close thing, and being in Iowa, here on USA Wrestling, we do a lot more 50,000 foot view stuff. So I'm going to say this, and correct me if I'm wrong, and it won't hurt my feelings, but my understanding from reading different things is that Kemmer was the catalyst, or at least one of the catalysts, of starting the pipeline from Pennsylvania kids coming to Iowa. I know Street Matter, Young Guns, his time there, but the story about how Brand literally got in his car and drove out there because a phone call or a recruiting trip or something didn't go the way he wanted it to go, and got him. And then the Caleb Youngs and eventually the Spencer Lees of the world followed him. Is that story, do I have that story fairly accurate? And then B, I'm a guy that coached in junior college for a lot of years and clearly understand the importance of recruiting. If that guy can be a catalyst for the kind of crew that they had up there, that feels like another low-key, subtle flex on, the value of bringing him in. If he's the kind of guy that people want to follow, if he's a, charismatic leadership qualities, probably be super helpful when they bring kids on recruiting visits.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, he was a huge part of, the Pennsylvania to Iowa pipeline, right? It's funny, that story, which is absolutely true. Recruiting visit goes wrong. Tom Brands drives 700 miles through the night to kind of correct it and seal that recruiting job. That brought Kemmer out. The first one was actually Caleb Young. He quietly committed before, Kemmer, before Marinelli, before Murin, before Spencer. But Kemmer was the big one. Like, he was the first one on campus from that Pennsylvania group, that Young Guns group. And Spencer Lee has said, if Kemmer didn't ended up going to Iowa City, I probably would not have ended up here either. So his commitment and his inclusion in the program is huge in more ways than one.
Yeah, so I'm glad I got that right, and you didn't have to correct me on national radio. So.
Yeah, but you make a good point. Like, that's kind of interesting, what kind of impact, in addition to coaching, in addition to being a guy that can roll around in the room with those weights, in addition to potentially wrestling for a few more years, what kind of impact can Michael Kemmer have in Ithaca with Cornell, a team that's, a program that's already very, very, very good. What's that going to do in terms of recruiting for Cornell as well? I think that's an interesting point, and nothing but good things, right?
Well, I can tell you this: when we got Duran Wynn, we'd worked on him, for a long time. And when Duran verbaled, and he was kind enough to verbal in the fall, and back then you couldn't sign in the fall. That's how old I am and Duran is. He helped us get Jamel Jones, helped us get Aaron Senzi, who you're a Kansas City guy. Yep. All three of those guys ended up winning nationals for us. He helped us get Bobby Kahn, who was an All-American. Bobby got us Derek Hearn. Donald Woods wanted to work out with those guys, and all those guys were All-Americans. And I don't think people necessarily understand the dominoes of that when you're not in the program.
Yeah.
Like, my dad didn't even really understand it, and he was the head coach, but obviously I was the guy doing all the recruiting. And I'm like, I think we're going to get all these guys. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. I really do. Like, it was a lot of hustle and $500 a month cell phone bills back then when you paid by the minute, but there are certain kids, like young men, kids, whatever you want to call them, that are super charismatic and people want to be around them. And I don't think anybody would argue that Spencer Lee didn't have a better college career than Michael Kemmer, but like you said, that Spencer said, he's probably not there if it's not for Michael Kemmer. So, I just thought it was interesting because I know how much love the Brands have and Morningstar have for Kemmer, the whole crew. Bobby Telford, that's a guy that probably needs to be on a podcast because he does a great job and nobody ever talks to him. But anyway, I just thought that's interesting. The Lamont thing was interesting. So listen, man, I appreciate you pinch hitting. It was fun. It's basically what we talked about on Media Row, and just we recorded it. So it's always fun talking to you, man. I'm proud of you. You're doing really good things up there.
No, man, I appreciate you reaching out. And I've always joked with some of the other like Iowa wrestling media people that, like, man, if we just hit record on some of the conversations we have on press row during those events, we could make a heck of a podcast. So kind of funny that we're able to turn around here just a few days later and basically regurgitate what we were talking about. No, I had fun, man.
Yeah, you're right. And those things, that's kind of how this whole podcast started. This one and the other one was just having conversations really with assistant coaches for Matt Chad. And then basically it's me and Ostrander just talking about what happened. And I'm like, we could probably, at the time, track wrestling was like, we originally did it with Andy Hamilton and then Alex Steen and Marcus Hain. So the list of people I've been the Robin to their Batman is long and exclusive. So welcome to the club. Yeah. So I will see you, I'm guessing, Fargo.
Yeah, you'll be down in Tulsa for junior duels, right? So I'll be down there in less than a month at this point.
I'm collecting wings. Just want you to know that enough
Sounds
time.
Like a plan. I'll be down there.
Yeah, we'll get together with a bunch of those coaches. Junior duels are really fun. We're actually, the next couple of mat chats are going to be previews of junior duels. I think we're going to get some of the coaches on, do roundtable. So one last thing, any guidance on dealing with Adam Fellers?
I just go with the flow, man. He's as free a spirit as you'll ever meet. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet.
Yeah, I'm teasing. He's a good person.
He's a little out there, but he great heart, good dude.
Passionate, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I probably talk to him, if not every day, every other day. We just trade messages back and forth. He's an awesome guy.
So he made those winners win shirts at Junior Duels.
Absolutely,
and,
he did.
When they won, he just walking around handing them out like Santa, and he hands you one. He's super funny. Like, I don't know him that well. He's a Fort Dodge guy, so I kind of know him through Ostrander and Moffitt and those guys. But he's like, I know you root for Oklahoma, but here you go. I'm Switzerland, man. I don't root for anybody. I root for nobody to get hurt. That's my thing. So,
hey, we quietly root for that team Missouri, though, sometimes.
You and I root for Missouri. Listen, we're from here. Again, like, we root for all the teams that we have relationships with. But at the end of the day, we don't want anybody to get cheated. We want everybody to have an opportunity, and then the chips fall where they may, right?
1000%.
All right, man. For Mark and Grant and Cody, I'm David. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening, and sharing. We'll talk to y'all next week.
Boom.